SummerSlam match didn't happen, and Bret Hart was pissed off with Hogan and kind of held a bit of a grudge with Hogan because of that. So history repeating itself, to be honest with you, as far as I'm concerned, looking back on this SummerSlam 2005 match. And I think, and the plan was for Hogan to win the series 2-1 overall over their three matches. So he still would have had, the upper hand. But I just don't think he liked the fact of putting Shawn Michaels over in that middle match, and maybe just didn't think he was capable of pulling off 2 or 3 more matches, a couple more matches against a younger, more agile, more athletic talent. And let's be honest with you, I mean, Shawn Michaels was better on the microphone. I think he delivered better promos. Certainly in this time, he was more confident in front of the camera than Hogan. So maybe there were some insecurities there that kind of troubled Hogan, and maybe think, well, if I can get the first win and duck out of the other 2 matches, then I go away, with my ego intact and my fans happy. I really believe that it was Hogan's ego that kind of led to the kind of much talked about history of this match, to be honest with you.
To play a little bit devil's advocate, as I always do on this podcast, do you think there's a bit of, I was kind of thinking, these 2 guys have both had crazy histories with politics. Is it almost like they've kind of met each other's match in this, and Hogan's just the one that manages to both? Because obviously you talk about Hogan, with Bret, people always point about WrestleMania 13, about the match that Bret should have had a return match with Michaels to have, and whether that injury was 100% legit or not, we'll never know, but certainly eyebrows were raised. And it's almost like, poor old Bret out of all this, by the way, he had a rough deal, didn't he, back there with these guys. But, it's almost, and now, all these years later, they've met one another. And so, yes, they are in different generations, but although they're completely different wrestlers, their politics and insecurities back then, in their heydays, were very much similar. To how they were, and it just makes me. It is funny when you think about it, and now all of a sudden they're against each other, and it's like, well, who really is going to get it? I guess it boils down to one man, as it always does, which is Vince McMahon. I mean, Vince is the guy ultimately that says who's going over and who's not, and he would have probably had to have done a little bit of persuading for Shawn on this one, I would imagine, but.
But I mean, I don't know how much say Shawn Michaels had in what was going on, but I mean, my understanding is that Hogan pulled out of the 3-match series kind of without notice at the very last minute, possibly the night after SummerSlam. So I think that Shawn Michaels went into this on the understanding that one thing was going to happen, when in actual fact Hogan kind of had no intentions at all. But I think that Hogan has always had the ear of Vince McMahon, and they've had an interesting relationship over their 40 years together. But I think more often than not, McMahon will side with Hogan, whoever is on the opposing side of Hulk Hogan, whether it be Shawn Michaels, whether it be Bret Hart.
I mean, it must have been quite a hard decision, because then although Hogan, you think Michaels and Vince as well. I mean, even when Michaels was a complete an utter arsehole, quite frankly, back in the 90s, he still went with his attitude. I mean, he was finding him, but obviously backed him with the whole Bret thing. I don't know. It's almost like his 2 favourite kids, and he's got to pick one all of a sudden. It must have been quite something. Out of all that. Okay, some of the comments that I read coming out of this, just to finish up on this podcast, I found it quite fascinating, because I was trying to read at that time what people were writing about this. Well, first and foremost, Uncle Dave Meltzer gave this a 3.5 stars, which is it's not terrible by any stretch for Meltzer to put that. And then a couple of other journalists wrote, no wrestling, just HBK overreacting. This is not a match. This is a joke. I didn't care if HBK did it to taunt Hogan or for any reason. This match was a complete joke in wrestling terms. Shame to waste my money on this pay-per-view. So he hated it. And then another person wrote, watching Shawn flop about like a fish was funny. Not a great match, though. There is no reason to watch this. I've got to say, I think they're kind of a little bit harsh about the match, because although he did oversell, I don't think it's a match that it's not like a Goldberg Undertaker scenario.
No, it could have been a lot worse, couldn't it? It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah,
And it went quite. I mean, it went what 25 minutes, I think the match was. So and there wasn't any. It wasn't. There wasn't any kind of massively noticeable flat spots. There was sequences running throughout the whole of this match, and you did see a story. Throughout the match, it did have 2 or 3 different elements to this match, and I looking back on it today, it wasn't too bad, and I think Dave Meltzer's assessment 3.5 stars was probably about right.
Yeah, well, dude, look at the audience. I didn't see too many disappointing faces. I've seen a lot of pay-per-view endings where everyone's flat, but this looked like everyone was engaged. So I think regardless of what the actual match quality is like, you got to remember Hogan's age and where he's at this time. We know Michaels can go whenever, but at this time Hogan isn't the same by any stretch. But
it was never going to be a Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit match, was it?
The fact that they had everybody engaged, they told the story that they were set out to do. That's the main thing that came off here, despite the overselling. Perhaps just to sum up this one, I mean, this is 2, I guess, 2 of the biggest icons definitely that we'll cover. Like I said earlier, I'm glad we got the match. How do you think this overall gets remembered from your point of view, John? Like, how will you remember this? Is this going to be one of those ones that you tell somebody to go and watch them 2 icons? Because on paper this looks like magic, doesn't it? But do you think this match does hold the test of time, or do you think this is always going to be remembered as a bit of a joke?
I think before I watched it back today, earlier on this afternoon, then again with yourself just now, John, I would have said my kind of automatic, if somebody were to say Hogan versus Shawn Michaels, main event of SummerSlam 2005, my first reaction would be, well, that's the one where Shawn Michaels oversells throughout the whole match, and it was a complete joke, and he tries to make Hogan look stupid. Well, he did try to make Hogan look stupid in the first 5, 6, 7 minutes of that match, the first third. But then, the second 2/3, the second half of the match was actually not too bad, and as you could see a switch in the match, you can see a switch in the pace when it turned into more of a fight, when Hogan started to bleed, and you had the close near falls, and I actually was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a better match than I remember it being. So if somebody were to come up to me now and say, well, what about this match from 2005, I would say, go and check it out. It's entertaining. The fans were really, really into it, and it was a good battle between 2 icons, between 2 legends. But by the way, the first 5 minutes is Shawn Michaels massively overselling. After that is pretty good. So that's kind of how I would have summed it up before watching it today, and maybe afterwards. So I think my opinion has changed on the match. So yeah, that's my view anyway. But it's better than I remember. I'm glad that I've got a chance to kind of see it back, with a fresh pair of eyes, you could say, today. I would probably wouldn't sell it as a must-see match. But if somebody was bored and wanted half an hour to kill, I'd probably say go and watch that match. It's a bit controversial because of these reasons, but overall it was fairly good.
Absolutely, I give this a pass for me. I think this is right. I mean, if this was in front of an 80,000 crowd, they would have probably gone nuts, all of them, like this smaller crowd did, like 18,000, because these are 2 guys that don't really have to do an awful lot to be able to get people engaged. They're just that good, and like I said, the feud going into it kind of was enough. They didn't need to do crazy stuff. They didn't need to be on every segment, every show. And despite the result, I think this match, it definitely gets a pass. This is definitely one of those ones, if you haven't seen it, go out your way to do it just because, you've seen it. And, because it is one of those generation things. And you are seeing Michaels, who's predominantly a 90s guy, up against the sort of 80s retro Hogan, if you will, even though he wouldn't have been able to do as much as he could back then. You're getting those styles clash. And that's the one thing I like about this match, I'll say about it, is the fact that they do deliver on what they're known for in this match, which is kind of a cool thing, because sometimes they only play to one strength, which isn't always great. But this one's a pass for me overall. But it was good to go back on. Again, 15 years since this, which I can't believe. But I do remember watching this sound. I think I actually even bought the DVD. I was that much into this whole thing. And I remember there being a poster of the Hogan Michaels. It's probably somewhere. I don't know where it is. But thank you very much, John, for coming on this one and taking time out to go back to 2005.
No, it's been my pleasure. It's been an absolute blast to watch back that main event with you, John. Always a pleasure to be on your podcast. And thanks for inviting me. And hopefully we can do something similar somewhere down the line. But thanks again, buddy.
Absolutely. Now, and before we go, John, don't forget, let's have your social handles out. Let's find out where we can go to find out more of your good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one-stop shop is the Wrestling with Johners website. We can just go to wrestlingwithjohners.com. You've got all the links at the top of the page there for all the podcast archives, all the interviews that I've done over the last couple of years, all of our social media links. But essentially, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do it. It's just with Johners_pod. We're on Instagram. Just go to at Wrestling with Johners, and why not go and visit our ever popular, fun and friendly Facebook community page. Just search Wrestling with Johners. And as for the podcast, you can find us on all popular podcast platforms, including YouTube. So go and give us a visit there and a follow and a subscribe. But otherwise, just the website, wrestlingwithjohners.com.
Yeah, and do go and check it out. John's got loads of interviews going on at the moment. Lots, as much as I was doing, I think you've got going on. So he's always got somebody fresh on there, and well recommended. So go and check that out over with John Scott. Times 2.
Yes.
It gets really complicated, this does, I tell you. Now I've kind of branded it as a John Scott podcast. It's even more confusing where we're at. But I guess we'll share it. We'll trademark it somewhere to make sure. But no, thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome.
For those people, listeners, asking more about this series, because this is a different kind of series to what we normally do. This goes out as a podcast, but also this and the Ric Flair Hogan one episodes that we did are also going to be featured in sort of small, about 15 minutes or so video, where they're going to basically have lots of footage going on in the background on what we're talking about. And it's another good way to take in all this stuff. So if you have if you've missed Hogan and Flair and you want to get it in a little bit of a shorter form and not do the watch along side of it, then you can do that by checking out the videos. They will be released in August of 2020. So whenever you're listening to this, they will be available then along with this one. And I'm hoping for the next one, I'm probably going to have to stay away from Hogan. Otherwise, people are going to start thinking this guy's an undercover Hulk Hogan, Mark. You know, he's not told us something. So, it's just goes to show you how influential Hogan was over his time. The fact that I picked 2 out, that's far. But I will go elsewhere just for the sake of it. But no, thank you again, John, and thank you everyone for listening. Again, from both John Scotts, we'll see you next time.